Okay, continuing on with the Fool. When we last left, we had Wiggle Grin's conversation, well, his performance and the Triarch's conversation back in Volantis. We flash to find out that it's Sam, influencing him, giving him stories, and now we find out that Sam is back here, and all of his friends are across the river because of the Ironborn invasion, and he has to go out and rescue Rune, who has disappeared. So we're continuing on. He says, to the north there's a mother house. Leaving the Isle of Ravens was no small task. The Ravenry's gates were closed and barred. This is this idea that now the Ravenry, the Citadel has changed, and so the Isle of Ravens was a keep, was a just like Battle Island were, and the Bloody Isle, and all these little keeps existed from long ago. So the City Watch is going to use them for what they are, for their defensive purposes. So all of a sudden, Sam's little Isle of Ravens, which was supposed to be out of the way, is now being utilized in a military sense. So this is to highlight that. So leaving the Isle of Ravens was no small task. The Ravenry's gates were closed and barred, so Pate had to ascend to the ramparts in search of guards to open them. Just logically talking about, like, well, if you lived at the Isle of Ravens during a military situation, what would it be like? Outside of the gate, they found the drawbridge to the mainland to be mainland up, and spent the better part of an hour waving and yelling until the winchmen got to their job. That was the way of it of late. Moving about the Citadel was great inconvenience, but as long as they didn't venture onto the great bridges or beyond the Sphinxes, they were safe for the nonce. I use great bridges because there is a small bridge between the Isle of Ravens and the mainland. But to keep all of his friends on the other side of the river, we had to have a great bridge, a long bridge to span the entire Honeywine. And then beyond the Sphinxes, there's Sphinxes at the front door of the Citadel, is what he's talking about. So as long as he didn't venture onto the great bridges or go out the front door, he was pretty safe in the Citadel. The Maesters claim that Protector of the Citadel was most sacred of Lord Hightower's titles. That is one of his titles. It's not necessarily his most sacred, but of course the Maesters would claim this. As such, the City Watch had been dispatched to defend the Knights of the Mind. Knights of the Mind is a term that Lewin uses to call for the Maesters from any harm, along with the Ravens' books and scrolls they held so dear. Guards stood sentry everywhere, it seemed. At each of the Citadel's gates, on its river-facing ramparts, the idea is that, there's all these, the Citadel has all these ramparts that are going to be facing the river, so they're going to be there. Around its many docks, and large and small. This is just to prevent the Ironborn from landing, and to keep our characters safe. We don't want our characters killed off here. They had not yet weathered attack, but some whispered that the Iron Men were merely biding their time before seeking riches here. Some of the Citadel's tomes were more valuable than Valyrian steel, and 1,000 times more deadly in the wrong hands. This is sort of a reference to the tome Blood and Fire, and perhaps other mystical things that they had, mystical books that they have. For now, most of the Ironborn had docked far away, down on Battle Isle. Battle Isle is where the Hightower is, upon which the Hightower stood. Lord Leighton was trapped within. Of course, he's always there all the time. Surrounded by raiders, though how much that mattered, the Maesters debated. The tower was impregnable, with vast granaries and deep cisterns. So this idea that if he's been chilling there a long time, they probably have vast granaries and cisterns. The thing is huge. The Hightower is huge. It would take years for a siege to starve the old man out. Just like it took, a year to starve Stannis out. So long enough for Highgarden or one of the Boy Kings to build an entire new fleet to come to their rescue. We saw in A Feast for Crows that, it takes months to build ships, months to build a fleet, but, not years. So the idea is, yes, Highgarden or, Sweet Robin, Tommen, or Aegon could conceivably build a fleet and deal with the Ironborn. For that reason, some of the guards said that the Crow's Eye had set miners on the island to dig beneath the Hightower and topple it, though that might take even longer. Came up with the mining idea because the Ironborn essentially have two major occupations that we hear about. I mean, there's fishermen and farmers. There are, but we specifically hear about the mining in the Drowned Man chapter. That the Good Brothers are mining peoples, and this is brought up by Theon even earlier. And so that the Ironborn do have a background in mining, and so if you were and mining comes up when they're trying to take Dragonstone, that they're trying to mine underneath the walls. So this idea that perhaps the Crow's Eye would try to use miners on the island, and this we're going to come into what exactly the plan is later on. But of course, then we get to mining was the slowest of crafts. Albert had told him once. Albert was a builder that the Night's Watch, claiming the Wormways of Castle Black had taken decades to hollow out. And they do. I mean, mining, that's completely right. Sam tried to keep pace with Pate as they passed by the Seneschal's court. This is much of the same geography that Sam sees when he first arrives in Sam 5. So the Seneschal's court did have all of these stocks, but they were filled with maesters getting punished, or novices or acolytes getting punished. So all the stocks are filled with Iron Men now, the ones the City Watch had managed to catch. Half of them hung lifeless and pale, while the Cobblestone Guards took turns pelting the ones living with stones. Cobblestone Guards is a nickname for the City Watch given in an alternate version of the prologue of A Feast for Crows that I figured to pop in here. It never made it to the published book, but we're gonna put it in here. This idea that city guards are just torturing these caught Ironborn Reavers. Nearby, captains were questioning prisoners sharply, though any secrets would be difficult to hear over the screaming. Just adding the cruelty of war in here. As the sounds of the Reavers' agony faded, the victims could be heard ahead. Around the statue of King Daron, a camp had been erected for Old Town's wounded. Yes, as you walk in, it's the gates, then King Daron, the Seneschal's court. That's what Sam saw. Maesters and acolytes alike scurried from tent to tent with bandages and skins of wine. Archmaester Ebros, he's the healing Archmaester, had ordered all with a silver in their collar to serve here. Silver being the ring for healing. The link for healing. And those eager to learn were more than welcome amongst the blood. When not caring for Archmaester Walgrave, Pate spent most of his day here. This idea that Jaqen H'ghar, who is pretending to be Pate, he still has the responsibility of taking care of Archmaester Walgrave, so he has to do that. But he's spending most of his day here and was well on his way to earning his second link, because in the first chapter we established that Pate had finally earned his Ravenry link. Reading of swordplay doesn't make a knight, he had said, and reading of ailment doesn't make a healer. Sam had hands-on experience. Sam had gone with him one morning, but promptly passed out when a maester thrust a saw into his arms and commanded him to remove a man's leg. This is, the harshness of war, and Sam wouldn't be. That's how Sam would probably react to it. Past the camp, the main gates of the Citadel were open this morning to allow the able men of Old Town to march in. New recruits. Garth Hightower was training as many as he could in the way of the spear to avenge his dead brothers. So this is the idea that several of his brothers are going to, or at least a couple, are going to be, were at the sea battle. Because we hear about, in the appendix of A Feast for Crows, not an appendix of A Feast for Crows, in Samwell 5, the last chapter of A Feast for Crows, for Sam. I think it's the last chapter period, but he does hear about the different Hightowers and what they're doing to help the war. So Baelor Hightower was building galleys. Gunthor was in charge of the harbor. Garth is training new recruits, and Humphrey has gone to Lyce to hire sails. So 3 of those brothers, Baelor, Gunther, and Humphrey, were in danger because they relied on ships. Meanwhile, Garth is the one training new recruits. And so this is the idea that perhaps 3 of the Hightower brothers were killed, and Garth remains. And with its many courts and plazas, the citadel made a fine yard. Many of the would-be soldiers were young, Sam noted, younger than he had been when Alistair Thorne had first sent Halder against the Castle Black. Yes, Halder was sent in that first introduction chapter that Sam gets. He wondered whether a single one of these boys was as hapless as he had been. Sam just being down on himself, which comes repeatedly. Sam and Pate kept their heads down, fighting against the flow of men, steady as an ox. So, in case you didn't catch it, we have Sam on a couple of occasions is going to be quoting Dahan. So Dahan was a bravo, and so he's trained in the same way that Arya is trained. So like while Arya is thinking about these things like, quiet as a shadow and stuff like that, Dahan did that as well in the Bravo chapter. But now we see that Sam is saying them as well. And the idea is that a piece of Dahan is dead, but a piece of Dahan is alive in Sam. In the same way that we hear about, a piece of Orell being an Orell's eagle, and then Varamir Sixskins kind of sensing him. An echo of Dahan is still alive within Sam here. And so this is why he says steady as an ox. In time, they passed beneath the portcullis and beyond the sphinxes. They'd walked no more than 100 yards from the citadel before they found themselves alone. An eerie stillness fell upon them, one Sam had not felt since his time with Gilly in the haunted forest. Yes, when he comes back, he's going to be alone with Gilly a lot. But even then, he could hear the wind and the rustling of leaves. Here and now, the streets were quiet, too quiet. The only sounds were the faint buzz of flies and droppings, and their steps echoing as they strode. Trying to think of what a silent city would sound like. Now and again, Sam caught sight of movement on the balconies. Curtains swayed, shadows shifted with windows, shutters inched open and closed. They were being watched, he knew. It felt something, and that felt somehow wrong. It's all backwards. I should be the one watching, not them. This is getting into him being Gollum about the glass candle, addicted to the glass candle. Good day to you, Pate called up to an old face in a window. It disappeared at once. I'm looking for my friend, a chunky boy, a novice of the Citadel. Of course, this is Pate's description, but it's also Sam's description. Ain't that him there beside you? A voice yelled back. Pate looked at Sam, then back to the window. The one we're looking for is somewhat younger and somewhat smaller. You'll be somewhat deader if you don't get off the streets. Fool! Screamed another voice from somewhere behind them, to bring back the theme of the chapter, the fool. Who's the fool? Is it Sam or is it Wigglegrin? They walked on, down roads and winds and alleys. They always talk about these like winds and alleys of Old Town. From what he'd heard, it wasn't far to the mother house of our Princess Miguel. So when you read about different convents, they're often called like the convent of our Lady of our Merciful Mary, or convent of Our Lady from Syria, a convent of our something. It's always this something of our idea. So this is why it's mother house of our Princess Miguel. Miguel being one of the Targaryen princesses who became a septa in Old Town, and so it's named after her. Miguel being she's a daughter of Jaehaerys the First, Jaehaerys the Conciliator. But Sam wasn't quite sure the way. The streets of Old Town were confusing as they were crooked, and this was not a part of the city he frequented. More than once they had to double back after finding they'd reached a dead end, and too often the roads would twist, leading them back toward Hightower rather than away from it. These kinds of cities do exist in the world. If you've ever been to a city like Fez in Morocco, it's just the most confusing thing in the world, where city where roads move back on each other, and all of a sudden you're at a dead end. It's very city. Some of these old world cities can be very confusing. It seemed as though he'd whispered sorry to Pate half 100 times, though the acolyte was ever patient. Just when Sam feared they were getting lost, someone called their name. Turning around, they found Rune standing within the rusted fence of an old stone house. Rune! It was good to see his friend was hale and healthy. Hale and healthy is a common way to say someone's in good shape in old-timey way. Where have you been? I was heading back to the Citadel when I heard squids about, Rune said. He hiked up his robe and climbed over the fence. The Wisdoms let me hide with them. Wisdoms? Asked Sam. What is this place? So Wisdom is a title that George used in some of his sci-fi, namely The Glass Flower. It's used in some other sci-fi and fantasy stuff too. I think Wisdom, is it used in it's used in Wheel of Time, I think, as well. Wisdom is a healer in that. But it's in fantasy and sci-fi, we often hear about this title, Wisdom, but George uses it as well and stuff. But the point is in A Clash of Kings, the Wisdoms are the pyromancers. And so the pyromancers of King's Landing, we figured there'd probably be pyromancers in Old Town. And one of the previously, when I put out the chapter call, they just kind of run into Rune and find him. But one of the submissions had him hiding with the pyromancers, which makes more sense because now we're seeding one, like a reason for the Iron Men to be in this area, and foreshadowing what the Iron Men are going to do. Which, when I'm talking about the mining and how the mining is going to take too long, well, what if you have some help? In bringing down the high tower. But this is all foreshadowing and seeding that. So it was a good submission that reminded that placed the pyromancers in here. And he says, "What is this place? A guild hall?" That seemed queer to Sam. Before they burned, the guild halls of the 13 greater crasps had been down at the mouth of the Honeywine. So yes, guilds, the old medieval guilds of England, they did have different groups where they're called like where they're talking about the guilds of the greater crafts and the lesser crafts, and they had like collections of them. They all had heraldry and such, but this was all influenced by real history that you're talking about, the guild halls of greater crafts and the guild halls of the 20 greater crafts or the 10 greater crafts, the guild halls of the 20 minor crafts and things like that. So we just have 13 here, and they were on the western bank. They were down at the mouth of Honeywine on the western bank. Besides, the halls were huge, more like palaces, not mere houses with crumbling mortar. For what trade? Mummery, said Pate, pointing to a coat of arms carved on the building's side. It was a simple thing, 2 chevrons and no other adornment. Just give it whatever. I mean, for heraldry. But the idea is that they would have a simple old heraldry. This is the guild hall of the alchemists. That explained it. A guild of such ill repute lacked the coin to have a hall amongst the profitable trades. Weaving and smithing and cobbling were skills of 1,000 hands, crafting the goods of 1,000,000 homes. But alchemy, these are all, yes, in old and medieval times, the guilds did cover things like weaving and smithing and cobbling. Those would be the greater crafts that would have guilds. Crafting the goods of 1,000,000 homes, but alchemy, some maesters would call it useless. With a pang of guilt, Sam found himself thinking of Robert's brother Malwyn. By coincidence, Malwyn was an alchemist. He'd been an alchemist, but not a very good one. Or any of them any good. There's debatable about the importance of alchemy in history. Some people say that, back then, real doctors were kind of flukes too. Going in and bleeding people and stuff like that. And alchemy, where they were going in and usually, health potions and whatnot. I'm sure it depended on the city and the time of who was better, a doctor or an alchemist. But here in this story with Tyrion trashes the alchemists. So he's saying that the alchemists are a bunch of charlatans. And so we're going with the Tyrion opinion of alchemy here. And this is fairly consistent with what Tyrion says. The trade of alchemy went back to the Age of Heroes, predating the Citadel by thousands of years. Novices found that hard to believe. How could peddling and lies endure for so long and with such success? Of course, the Citadel is competing with the alchemists, so of course they're going to teach the novices that alchemy is hogwash. Just 5 centuries passed, and this is because Tyrion says in recent centuries they lost their sway. So we have to have it be very recent. Just 5 centuries past, the counsel of an alchemist was even preferred to that of a maester, much to the conclave's annoyance. So this is all consistent with Tyrion. They offered elixirs for ailments the body cured for itself. And this is how a lot of witch doctors and whoever work. Somebody goes in sick and the witch doctor does something and then they get better. Well, they would have gotten better anyway. So and then they get all the credit. Archmaester Periston had told the novices. Archmaester Periston is the history guy. In time, the kings of Westeros saw the ruse for what it was. There was truth in his words, but from what Sam had read, the alchemist's decline was more complicated. There were factions and infighting, and they suffered a number of disasters over the centuries that their reputation could endure. And this is just kind of coming up with a few things that they would do. We know that alchemists deal with poisons, so the poisoning of King Rickard and his direwolves, I just made up this. There had to be a King Rickard in the north at some point, and he probably had direwolves, so the failure to transmute King Christopher's lead. There's all these Christopher Mud kings in the Riverlands, so they're supposed to do transmutation. Summerhall, obviously, the pyromancers were there. Lace too, Sam wondered. No, it wasn't fair to blame that night on Robert's brother. It was his own fault. 9 had died that night, and so I had to go back and count. It is 9. You have the 2 guards, and then obviously Mother Mole and Dahan, but then he enters and he kills Traegar, and then there's 2 guards in there, and then 2 guards run in, and so that adds up to 9. Yeah, at least 9 because of me. He wondered what became of the rest, Malvin and Colio and the fishwife. We don't know what happened to them. Probably killed. But we're gonna lampshade it for now. He hoped they survived somehow and vowed to himself to do better with the fool. But can I keep my word this time? This is getting into George R. R. Martin's beliefs about morality. He believes that this is largely from Dying of the Light, that your personal word, if we are the ones who define our own morality and our moral code, and frankly we are, the world, even if you claim that you follow the Bible, you're picking and choosing which passages of the Bible to follow. The passage of the Bible that says to kill children who don't follow their parents, you ignore. The one that says love thy neighbor, you follow. So you are the one choosing your moral code, and therefore, if you are the ones defining your moral code and you make a promise, which is you are defining your moral code, you're making a promise, you're saying you're going to do something, and then you don't do it. Well, what are you now? Well, now you're just nothing. You can't even follow your own moral code. And so George R. R. Martin is very big on promises. Promises are a big deal to him, at least in Dying of the Light. But can I keep my word this time? I'd rather not dawdle here, Pate said. Danger's about. Back to the Citadel, swift as a deer. Again, Dahan, right there. Dahan makes his appearance. As they walked, Pate couldn't but help scold the novice. I hope your game of Come to My Castle was worth the risk. This was the... Come to My Castle is the child's game that people use to as a stand-in for sex. It's kind of like the idea is maybe it's playing doctor or something among people in Westeros. Rune's face turned as pink as a pomelo's flesh. I'm just mentioning the pomelo because that was something that was on the fool's mind because he was trying to get the pomelo as it rolled away. We didn't get to play any games. Corellin's great aunt was in the room. This is Corellin from A Storm of Swords, Arya chapter, that she was down here, the great aunt who she went to stay with. But some good did come from it. The old crone plans to leave the city and head to Stonehelm. This is because she's a swan. She's hired a whole retinue of knights to escort them. Mayhaps we could go with them. Stonehelm, Sam asked. Didn't Lazy Leo say it fell to the Golden Company? Stonehelm probably did fall to the Golden Company. We didn't, and so Lazy Leo is looking at stuff in that area because he's been watching the Golden Company. So yeah, we'd be marching across the continent from one war to another. The fighting might be over by the time we get there, Rune countered. Pate shook his head. After battles come bandits. The Riverlands are still perilous, even with the young wolf long since slain. There must be a safer place, closer to here and untouched by war. And then Horn Hill, Sam blurted out. He wasn't sure why I'd said it. This is very Sam. He just blurts out stuff like this. There's that beautiful brain slayer, Rune said, smiling. 100 miles from the Mander and the Highlands to boot. Safe as a mouse in a mill. Just came up with a nice little metaphor here that they might say safe as a mouse in a mill, because you don't want to say like, if we said safe and as a bug in a rug or something, it would just sound too like our world. So safe as a mouse in a mill, because mice love mills. Lots of stuff to eat. And it's true that Horn Hill is in the Highlands and far from the Mander. Your home it is. We'll need to convince the old crone first, then send word to Aleros and Robert and the rest. Of course, we'll need to keep Melander from raiding your wine cellar, but many arms lighten the bale. This is like, many, this is another saying that just sounds like it would be from them, that if you put it in many arms lighten the load is just too close to our world. So what have I done? All of them, Sam asked. Even without a dozen companions, he thought of returning. The thought of returning to Hornhill filled him with dread. Lord Randall was off serving with King Tommen's justiciar, but the word of his son's arrival would soon be sent to King's Landing at once. Then his father would know he'd been studying to be maester. He might even think him a deserter and have me hanged, or worse. Seeing his lady mother, sisters would be grand. But what would he do with the glass candle? So I'm kind of setting up here. Sam's expectations are going to be reversed. This is always the case. So he is sitting there saying, oh gosh, I fear my father. But it'll be great to see my mother. It's a long way in the future because we still have some chapters before he gets to the Horn Hill. But the idea is that his mother is going to be the one that's going to be upset with him because Sam renounced his religion quite publicly in a sept at the wall, and that's going to break his mother's heart. So there's going to be a conflict here, and he's not seeing it. He's like, oh, my lady mother and sisters, that's going to be great. Anyway, but then what does he do with the glass candle? I need to go with them. If I put it in a quiver, this actually comes from putting the glass candle in the quiver actually comes from, again, the previous version of the prologue that George wrote when Pate actually tries to escape with it, and he shoves it down his pant leg and he gets cut all over. And he actually says afterwards, I should have just put it in a quiver. And so here, this is it. Sam thinks, I'll just put it in a quiver. Sam, Pate said, startled. He looked up and saw they weren't alone. Up ahead there were men, a half dozen of them, armed and approaching. The boy spun around to flee and found 3 more of them closing from the other direction, trapped. Is that them? One of them said, one of the men clutching a spear. I have to give each of them a description because in the fight, we have to know which person we're talking about. So this is the spearman. His voice was salted with the accents of the Iron Isles. When George talks about different accents, sometimes he says spiced with the accents of Dorne. Well, the pun there is that the Dornish have um, have hot peppers, and I think when she says he mentions the accents of the North, he says frosted with the accents of the North. And so the idea is if people from the North are frosted and people from the Dorne are spiced, people from the Iron Isles would be salted. And so there's some care going into this. His voice was salted with the accents of the Iron Isles. They don't look like no fire mages, a second said. That one had a sword and it wore a deep scar across his left cheek. Again, got to give each a description. Oh, I don't know. Soft and scholarly, observed the old man in a faded surcoat. Upon it, it was the stitched many-headed serpent. So this is Lord Saltcliffe. And we have the vision of the dark star blowing away the Salt Cliff. And so this was seen by Melisandre. They remind me of the Reader, of course, Roderick the Reader. You boys read. Well, we're only novices, Rune said, and an acolyte because Pate got his ring, so he's an acolyte now. We don't know anything. No learning at all, said the man of the black and greasy beard. Then we'll be happy to teach you how to die. Sam Tarley stood frozen in fear as the Reavers surrounded them. They raised their weapons, and one pointed a sword up against his chin. Its wielder smiled, showing off his sailor's gums. This is the idea that they get scurvy, so we just invented this term, sailor's gums. They say fat boys have, and I don't know what the rest would be. You know, there was a loud scraping sound, metal on metal. This is the scrape sword's blade. The scrape sword's blade makes a return, and chaos fell. The raider before him lost his head. A spring of blood erupted from his neck, showering Sam with red rain, warm and thick. All he could do was whimper as the headless corpse tumbled sideways to the ground. His blade rang on the stone against the stone. The raiders turned, and there stood a stranger, a big man, white of hair, with a bloodied long axe. That's our Hota. One of the Ironborn danced towards him, screaming and swinging his mace. But before he could reach his opponent, a sword sprouted from his stomach. I should have put the word headlong in here. That would be more George if he ran at him headlong. But he danced at him. Just as fast, he wrenched free by a man in a straw hat and a whitewashed shield strapped to his left arm. And here we have Darkstar. The whitewash is to cover his Dane heraldry, the straw hat because he's shaved his head and is wearing a straw hat, much like Egg from the Mystery Knight. There are two of them. 2 against 7 now. We've got to make it clear that in a fight scene, it's kind of important that we don't have people be confused. In a fight, you want to know what's going on. The hatted man retreated beside his big companion, awaiting the Iron Man's next move. The raiders fanned out. 4 of them attacked at once. Against sword and shield, that's against Darkstar, was the scarred raider and the serpent lord. The shield slammed into the raider's face with a thud, and the lord slashed at the hatted man's right side. There were parries, then a thrust, then more parries, all flashes of elegance. The sword blocked a throwing axe with his shield, but the impact made the man's hat fly from his head, revealing it to be shaved clean. Then with a sweeping blow, the bald man went low, and the 2 Iron Men were on the ground. The spearman followed the bearded reaver against the long axe. The reaver's attack was brash. The attack's shaft was 6 feet long. That's his long axe shaft of 6 feet. And the reaver's short sword had no chance of reaching the white-haired stranger at its end. With a spin of the blade, the big man's carved a wound in the gut of the first attacker. The spearman had better luck. With a lunge, the point of his spear met the big man's shoulder. He grunted and returned the blow with a monstrous slash. The spearman stayed on his feet for a time, but when his entrails fell to the cobblestone, he knew enough to fall down. And as quick as that, the battle was over. The other Ironborn fled, while the 2 strangers quieted their fallen foes. That was because it's ambiguous whether or not Darkstar had killed his. Sam remained still, transfixed in the blood of the raiders. It flowed between the cobblestones, spilling into the gutter at the center of the street. These old-timey streets, the cobblestone there's a gutter at the middle. That's how waste and everything kind of flows out. Um, and so the water shifted from brown to auburn. The idea is that they're getting a little more red. You saved us, Rune said in awe. With the hue and cry we're raised here, how could we not? Hue and cry is, in medieval times, there was this idea of the hue and cry that, like, if the public screams for something to be done, then, like, the idea is that, noblemen or police or security will act if, like, the public lets up a hue and cry. That in George uses the term a few times in Ice and Fire, but the idea is, to raise the hue and cry. But this is what it means here. This is the joke, is that the people of Old Town are all hiding indoors, so there is no hue and cry. Like, Sam and everybody are getting killed, and no one cares. And so Darkstar is making the joke, with the hue and cry raised here, how can we not? There was no hue and cry. And yet he came to the rescue anyway. So this is his joke. The bald man said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He sheathed his sword, making the terrible scraping sound once more, the scrape sword's blade. Only then did Sam's attention return to the strangers. I'm sorry, we shouldn't be out. Do you take me for your wet nurse? A man walks where he will. And there's an important line from Darkstar. And the fact that, like, Darkstar's line is the thing that Darkstar is the one that's actually influencing Wigglegrin. In this, like, weird congregation of the stories, conflation of the stories, like, Darkstar's line, a man walks where he will, is the thing that sticks in Sam's head for Wigglegrin to attach to. And he realizes, like, oh, I'm not to be commanded around. So Sam is like, oh, I'm sorry, we shouldn't be out. And Darkstar's like, dude, you should be able to walk wherever you want. I do not care. Like, a man walks where he will. He was a handsome man, strikingly so, with haunting violet eyes, like Alios's eyes. And, because Danes have purple eyes and Valyrians have purple eyes, is this... But this line, a man walks where he will, it's Darkstar. Darkstar ends up unintentionally causing the revolution in Volantis. We're looking for a mother house, said the big man, his voice deep and strange. From the Free Cities? Or was he Dornish? And this idea is that he is from the Free Cities, but he's been living in Dorne for many, many years. Rune scrambled to pick up the straw hat and return it to the bald man. You must be the knights. The ones the old crone hired to protect them. Of course they're not, but the two men exchanged a look and the bald man smirked. Well, I'm a knight. This one is my squire. The big man glowered at the bald one before saying, yes, his squire. The mother house of our Princess Miguel is just north of here, Rune explained. 2 rights, then a left, and beyond the felt market. The idea is felt is very common fabric in Middle Ages time. Like, everybody wore wool, but wool you have to kind of weave or knit. And so felt is great because you just take the wool and you get it wet and you smash it, you roll it up, and it's just much less time intensive than weaving and knitting. And so felt is very common in the Middle Ages because everybody just wore wool. So there's a felt market. The market isn't there anymore, but you'll see the empty square. The strangers each gave a curt nod, and the knight donned his straw hat once more. The big squire turned to Sam. You have blood on you. This is roughly double meaning because Sam has been getting people killed. So he has blood on him, but he literally has blood on him from the fight. With that, the pair set off, the knight's sword jangling in its scabbard, just like the scrape sword does. Their return was quick. Rune knew the way better than Sam, and they didn't make a wrong turn once. The citadel was much the same as when they'd left. Soldiers trained with spears, maesters tended the injured, and there was still no news of their friends across the river. After dinner and washing Archmaester Walgrave's small clothes is his underwear, Pate returned to the healer's tents with Rune following at his heels. Sam opted to stay behind the Ravenry. Here we get a little pun. I have no silver link, he had told them, and no metal to ever forge it. Metal is like is like like a spirit or courage within somebody. Um, and so when people say, does he have the metal? Is like does he have the we would say something like gusto? Does he have the spirit? But the joke is that metal sounds like metal, like silver, gold, metal, right? So he says, I have no silver link and no metal to ever forge it. There's a little pun here. That was no lie, but his true reason for lingering was the candle. It was Robert's night, but Robert wasn't there. And so Sam sat in his place and waited as the sunset changed the light from gold to pink to red. He sagged back in his chair, remembering the day. Sagging back in the chair is something that's very George. And then he's thinking, and he's feeling fat and weak and useless. His idea is that Wilgogrin is, even before entering the candle, like there's still this connection between him and Wilgogrin, or at least it's still in his head here, fresh. And Wilgogrin is going to have these memories of Sam, because one of the things that, besides Darkstar's saying a man walks where he will, he knows Sam is this spoiled highborn person trying to control him, and he is fat and weak and useless. And Wigglegrin realizes that all of the highborn people commanding him to do things are fat and weak and useless. So it's funny because Sam's patheticness is what actually inspires Wigglegrin to rebel, because he sees how pathetic Sam is. And so this is the important phrase here: fat and weak and useless. Worse than useless. He was no fighter, shielding the innocent from harm. He was no healer, saving the wounded from death. So this is the idea, is that he was no Darkstar and Hota, and he's no Pate either, and Rune. He had no craft, no skill, no knowledge. Kind of getting back to the guilds. No worth at all. The maester's chain was made from different kinds of metal for different kinds of learning, but Sam's neck was bare. Still a novice. The collar reminded the maester of all the people he served, but who did he serve? He had tried to be of use to the old bear, to Maester Aemon, to his dear friend John. In the end, he could only watch as each of them died before him in turn. Frozen with fear, just as with the Iron Men. The thought had made him sad. Now he served no one. No one but Gilly. He yanked the rag off the candle. A moment later, he was the wind over the red dawn. And we wanted to make this a little different than last time. It had to be faster because this chapter is getting so long. But just his transition is similar, but a little different from last time. A moment later, he was the wind. Over the red mountains of Dorne he blew, then over the disputed lands of the mighty Rhoyne. He plunged into the murky waters and floated on the current adrift. He washed up on a shore of 1,000 stones. No, 1,000 souls. 1,000 slaves. An old man pushed a cart loaded with tottering crates, singing to draw his mind from the strain. A mother wept as her babe spat out her nipple, for he had grown too old for her milk. This is a very common thing by the way, for mothers. I know, all you single guys out there may not know, but when a baby becomes too old for milk, that's a very emotional moment for women. A boy screamed on a bridge, nails through his hands and feet, praying for death. Of course, this is the people that were rounded up for pulling the one Western Bank guy from his hathy. He was shivering as he found him, and they let out a sigh together. The he's here are ambiguous. Who's finding whom? Well, it doesn't matter. They're the same. They let out a sigh together. So you've come along, have you, Wigglegrin? Wigglegrin figured he would. Let's get going then. Outside of Elios's manse, the fool made his way down the cobbled streets of the old city. The black walls loomed in the distance, 200 feet high and sinister as the darkling sky above them. Blocked out George loves the word darkling, by the way. Blocked out was the clamor and danger of the greater city, allowing the old blood to nestle snugly in their palaces and gardens. There were no throngs here. A throng is a loud kind of market area filled with people. No panders. That's a homeless person. No ruffians. That's a criminal. It was safe. The vast ring of black shut out the beauty too. It had been nigh on 15 years since he had seen a sunrise or sunset, or even the horizon at all. So now we get the idea of it. Will Gurgen's about 30. Spent half his life here. He was about 15 when he was picked up. The old city was reserved for the nobles of Volantis, who could trace their ancestry back to Valyria before the Doom. The Scions needed their comforts, however, and so exceptions were made for their distinguished guests, most of whom were slaves. This is just the logical thing. I mean, we've heard before that that the old city was only for the Scions of the old blood, but like that doesn't make any sense. They need their slaves, right? So here we go. So he's an honored guest. He's a distinguished guest. Honor imprisons me in the manse, Wilger mused, but for a night, honors get me out. And this is just a little pun because the money in Volantis are honors. And so honor imprisons him, but honors get him out. A fistful of them his escape had cost him, along with a wad of sour leaf and the pomelo he pocketed that day. So he got the pomelo back. That's what Crawny had demanded for the knife. So Crawny is a character from Starboy. Shit, am I forgetting it? It's right. Is it Starboy? How am I? Star Lady. I'm sorry, Star Lady. It's Golden Boy is the character in Star Lady. Okay, so Crawny is a character from Star Lady. Okay, so this is we just gave him the name Crawny. So Crawny here is another slave. Crawny demanded for the knife. The kitchen slave had stumbled upon it in a seldom used drawer and thought it was for paring cheese, but Wilgren recognized the craftsmanship at once because it's a hunter's blade. The idea is that Sam has been brought on all of these hunting trips, and so he has the knowledge of Sam. So he sees that it's a hunter's blade and knows its value. After balancing the hunter's blade on his finger, the guard at the postern gate decided it was a fine thing too. Back by dawn, he commanded, or else this one doesn't know you. So you can tell he's unsullied. This one doesn't know you. With a wink, the cloaked fool is on his way. Because he's a fool. He's like, give them a wink. At this hour, only other slaves were about. Here and there, they swept the streets, washed the cobblestones, hauled away the dung and sewage. When they needed to, they moved aside for the others, who pulled cartloads with fruits and vegetables, sacks of grains, and cages of livestock. Today's ship making way for the morrow's. The fool shook his head at the sight of it all. Without their chattel, the old blood's fragile little world would shatter at once. Here is our foreshadowing of what's going to happen. Were all the nobles as blind as the Triarchs? So Wigglegrin is a revolutionary here. He knows what's coming. In the garden of the Temple of Caraxes, the lights were few and dim. So we were trying to come up with where the jesters could meet. And so you need a public place. But what public places you're going to have when everybody has these interior gardens and stuff like that. And then it came to me that or maybe it was one of the submissions, but that one of the gods' temples, because they worship the Valyrian gods within the old city, that a public temple would be a place where maybe there would be a building that they could find refuge in to meet. And we know that the dragons are named after Valyrian gods. And so the idea is that there is a god called Caraxes. So this is not the temple of Daemon Targaryen's dragon, but it's the temple of the god in which Daemon Targaryen's dragon is named after. So in the garden of the Temple of Caraxes, the light were few and dim. Through a grove of shadowed lemon trees, just because, lemon trees, it's the south, it's hot and warm. The fool crept until he came to an old, just, giving a little Danny reference here. Came to an old stone barn filled with rakes and shovels. At the building's rear, half obscured by a blackberry bramble, was the cellar door. He pounded twice before a voice from beyond the boards asked, "Who's there?" "Wigglegrin," he said in hushed tones. "Who?" "Wigglegrin," he repeated louder. "A member of the Magnificent Council of Humorous and Handsome Jesters." And of course, this whole thing is a callback to the the Bravo chapter when Sam descends and knocks on the door for the meeting of the Nightwalkers. Here, Wigglegrin is doing something very similar with his Council of Magnificent and Humorous and Handsome Jesters. And they're doing the same. They're telling stories to each other. "You a little member. We ladies don't like them small, don't you know?" And he says, "Give me some time. I'll grow on you." This is the pun. I'll grow on you. Physically and personality-wise. The door opened. Within, he met a bucktooth woman, her face tattooed with a motley pattern of blue and gray. Again, all of the slaves have the motley because they're fools. Braying belay. We just made her foreign. Belay is just some sounds, but braying is what a mule does. So she has bucktooth like a mule. This was the newest of the council members, and it was good to have her in her company. A rare slave in Volantis, she hailed from Great Maroc. Maroc is an island in Ice and Fire that's way off in kind of near Lung. No, it's before you get to ET, but it's past Karth. Or no, I mean, actually, it's the island across from Karth, but no one ever talks about it. But it seems like people should be there, and so we threw in this character from very far away. The tale of our island was bold as they were bold and queer. A spice fresh and foreign always has the most flavor. So a little poetic metaphor for our Wigglegrin, the storyteller. Of course, if Wigglegrin were to repeat her stories to Alios, he would need to change them enough to be his own. Move the setting, turn tragedy to comedy, add horror or romance or magical loot. So the idea is that they tell the stories of truth, but then they change them to be lies, to be their own creative tales. That was the first rule of the jesters. No one could steal another's tale, not as it was. The same was demanded for a trick or a jape or a song. The masters often hosted one another, and there lay the peril for the tale-teller. A story already heard was like a meal already chewed. Serving such to a guest would be a grave insult. And this is kind of the case of writers in general, is writers read each other's work, but at the same time, and they read each other's work to be inspired. But at the same time, like, if you repeat the same person's tale, you're going to get in trouble. Like, if all of a sudden, George R. R. Martin writes a story about a clown in a sewer that's killing children, like, people are going to be like, George, but clearly he's, writers read each other for inspiration. So they're trying to be inspired without stealing. And this is what the jesters are doing. The other jesters arrived before him. They moved about the cellar through a haze of smoke from a dozen tallow candles, chattering and laughing. In the middle of the gathering, they'd made space for Stumblecat, could show off his tumbling. Stumblecat is also from Star Lady. Baby Boy, they just made up Baby Boy. But Kabara is a character from, I think, Overdrive? It's a George story. But Override, I'm sorry. Override is the second of the Corpse Handler trilogy. He has 3 stories in the Corpse Handler trilogy. Nobody Leaves New Pittsburgh, Override, and Meat House Man. Meat House Man, which is an incredible story. You could skip the other 2, but if you read Meat House Man, you should, if you have the chance to read Meat House Man, read it. But Kabara Jan is just from Override. Studying how he felt without breaking his arm. The others paid him no mind. They knew the technique well enough. Near a sunken window, Nalis the juggler was teaching Songfrog how to make an honor disappear. Those are just names. And over by some shattered pots, Logo was showing Inky how to flip an apple. Again, just names. Inky, because his ink is very dark. How to flip an apple. On his back of his hand to his palm and back again. I don't know if you've ever seen people do that with a ball. There at the rear, the man And his head whispered, Teleno the farter. Go to him. Teleno the farter, coming back from the beginning that we mentioned him there. He did as he was bid and shuffled through the crowd. Now he spotted him, his checked black and white face frowning. You're late. Not late, said Wiggle-Grin. Just very early for our next gathering. I'm sorry you missed this one, boomed a familiar voice as the speaker slapped him on the back. Wiggle-Grin swung around and found a portly fool standing there, his face tattooed orange and blue, with an overgrown beard dyed green. Saggy Pants, you look well. Bah, complained Saggy Pants. A well look is ill-suited for a jester. Tell me I look mad or feeble-minded. That'll keep me truly well. This is this idea that the jesters are, like, none of them are actually crazy. That we have to be looking out for Moon Boy and Butterbumps and stuff like that. That they're not actually crazy. Then might I say you look deranged, my good friend. Wiggle-Grin was half across the cellar when Nally's cupped his hands. It's time. Silence, silence. Your king commands it. This is a bit like the situation in the Mercy chapter, where the one guy thinks he's the king of mummers. The juggler thought himself the leader of a pack of fools. I see no king, protested Praying Bailey. What about King Aenys? One person sent me in this joke about King Aenys that, that's... And so, Aenys, like your anus. So therefore, what about King Aenys? Teleno the farter Teleno let out a fart. Can you at least smell him? This is the joke. That Aenys sounds like anus. Hoots and groans erupted amongst the jesters, but Nally's was unfazed. Who's first? Song Frog, Baby Boy yelled. Tell us more of the pious lord. Okay, the pious lord. The crowd began stomping their feet as if they were on a long march to a far-off land they would never see but hope to imagine. A simple story was all they asked for. That was nothing to men without ink. But for slaves, the words were a moment of freedom, a chance to know life outside their palaces made prisons. Whispers, the stories would be, most like wearisome. But marches were wearisome. And so is truth. Wearisome means something that causes you to be tired or bored. So, yes, marches are wearisome. So is truth. Truth makes you tired and bored. It's exhausting. That was the second rule of the jesters. The story must be true. Lies are brittle and fall apart when retold. But the truth bends like a fresh-cut reed, so the telltale would weave his own way. I was a bit inspired by a movie called The Lives of Others. Lives of Others is an incredible movie about East Germany before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And it follows a guy who's in the secret police, and at the beginning of the movie, he's like teaching a class to his students about how to tell when somebody lies. And he's like, and it's this interrogation, and this person like gives this story, and then he fast forwards like 8 hours in after the person's been tortured for like 8 hours, and the person like repeats the same line, and he's like, do you hear that? He repeated the line from the beginning verbatim. And he's like, the truth can be retold in a million different ways, but lies are scripted and lies are rehearsed. And so when you hear a line that's exactly the same, you know it's a lie. And later on in the movie, you start hearing him repeat lines because he repeats the doctrine of the state, and you're like, oh God, like Lives of Others is just a brilliant movie. But this inspired me that lies are brittle and fall apart when retold, but the truth bends like a fresh cut reed for the telltaler to weave his own way. But there's something special about the truth. Truth can be retold in a million different ways, while lies are rigid, they're brittle, they fall apart. All at once the jesters stopped and listened. Song Frog spoke. He told of that pious lord, but of a concubine too. So the pious lord is Lord Sunglass. Lord Sunglass fled Stannis in A Clash of Kings, and the concubine gets back to the Bravo chapter because this is Lyness Hightower. It was difficult. It was difficult to tell jokes to suit them both. The jesters had all heard of the Lord before, an exile. He was an exile from the Sunset Kingdom, taken in by Songfrog's master. The noble whore was new, though, a pretty thing. But weren't all whores pretty within the black walls. Song Frog related to how she'd been in service to some Lycian prince who'd been slain, and how she'd been thrown out by the widow before the body had even begun to stink. What can I craft from this tale? Perhaps a love story between her and the knight who spirited away. The knight, is that? I'll look it up right here. It's I've got to go to the appendix of A Dance with Dragons, because the connection is actually there, because this knight that that is one of the protectors of Edric Storm did work for Sunglass. Is it? Let's see. Yeah, Tristan of Tally Hill. So Sir Tristan of Tally Hill is the connection between Lord Sunglass is in Volantis and Tristan of Tally Hill, who works for Lord Sunglass, is keeping Edric Dane. I'm not Edric Dane, Edric Storm. And so if we have them connected with Linnes and they get ejected, well, where would they go? Well, it's logical that they would go to Sunglass in Volantis. So this is why we hear perhaps a love story between her and the knight who spirited away, her and Sir Tristan, or something with the parentage of the bastard boy she brought along. That's Edric Storm. Who's next? Mammoth, Inky yelled, his teeth gleaming white against the squares of blue and black, so Inky is so dark. The jesters stomped, and then they stomped. Mammoth spoke. Mammoth is this tiny little thing. He said Mammoth is ironic, his name. His master was a fanatic, one of the few of old blood who followed the lore. Red priests were hosted daily, and they were by and large a humorless bunch. The little fool tumbled for them, he japed, and even made the flames dance when he farted into them, but none of them even chortled. Because, you know, obviously a fart contains methane, which is going to burn when you fart into a flame. The master did, but the mercy, the master did, by the mercy of the Lord of Harmony. Lord of Harmony is Nathi god. Originally in an earlier draft, this was a different god, and it became confusing. So it's like, well, no, let's if it's like the Lord of Horses or if it's the Lord of the Great Shepherd, it's going to get confusing. So we'll have to be the Lord of Harmony. But he feared it was only a matter of time until the man grew sour too. Laughter ruled for the nonce, but the fool's screams were its heir. The idea that laughter is a lord and the fool's screams, the screams are its heir. A dismal tale, but could be twisted to comedy. Visions, but only when the jester breaks wind. Of course, this Mammoth's master is going to be key to Wigglegrin's plan, which is to lie and have the information get back to the Red Temple. Who's next? Teleno, Wigglegrin yelled. Say more of this wizard from the Sunset Kingdom. So now we get to hear about Marwyn. The jesters stomped, and then they stopped. Teleno spoke. Wigglegrin could feel the boy within him perk up. There you are, Fat Sam, your precious wizard tale. But to hear the farter tell it, the man had no magic at all. He was a scholar, he claimed, in search of some old dusty books. He'd been allowed through the black walls by his master's half-sister, the Sunbird's daughter. So we brought up that Arian Brightflame's son Magor, we established, was called Magor the Sunbird, and that he had fled to Volantis. This was established in Jamie 1. And so the Sunbird's daughter is alive. So this line still exists. She thought herself a great reader as well. They were old friends, this daughter and Marwyn, it seemed. She had known a Prince of Dorne who had studied with the wizard at some faraway school. So the idea here is that this is Lady Nim's mom. That Lady Nim's mom is actually Arian Brightflame's... Lady Nim is Arian Brightflame's great-granddaughter? So it'd be Arian, Magor the Sunbird. Keep in mind, we came up with the name Sunbird, but Arian Brightflame, Sunbird, Lady Nim's mom, Lady Nim. So this is what we're getting to here. This is why Oberyn was choosing this woman as his to father his child. Teleno pranced and shook for them, and the outsider hooted at every jingle. The sister said she would escort him into the library, so it seems they read some books together, or fucked between the stacks. He couldn't say. The stranger stayed some days, but before he departed, he went to the master, claiming he was heading east to enchant the Dragon Queen and control her. Teleno's master laughed at that louder than any joke he'd ever told him. So Teleno's master is not dumb. He's like, you think you can control Daenerys? You know, like, come on. So Teleno's master, yeah, is the right one here. Marwyn is arrogant. Was there a girl with him? Wigglegrin asked. We're talking about Gilly here. A wild thing from the far north of his lands. I saw a new girl within the manse, Teleno said. But that can be added to the tale easy enough, because Teleno is like, why are you asking this? I guess it's because you want to change it for your own story. What about... Who's next? Now he's cut in impatient. I, Wigglegrin, yelled Saggy Pants. Tell us more about these pirates in Old Town. The jesters stomped, and then they stopped. Fat Sam was there to give the story. You can tell them of the high tower and the miners beneath it. Or perhaps the knight in the floppy hat and the big squire. No, Wigglegrin whispered. A man walks where he will. He's saying, I'm not listening to you. You're not my master. We can't hear you, called out Brang Belay. I'll speak up, he called back. But alas, I shall not speak of pirates. No, tonight I speak of dragons. Dragons? What are you doing? My master hosted the other Triarchs, and there is news that comes from Slayer's Bay. The Triarch scouts say the dragons are dead, and so too is their mother. Of course, they didn't say this. They said that the dragons are missing, and that Daenerys is missing. They never said dead, so he's lying here. The room is quiet, and yet the city still stands. Its people remain free. The patchwork of motley faces looked confused. But how? Asked Baby Boy. The Myronese were slaves once. Weavers, whores, even some fools, I imagine. But they broke their chains. They won, twice now. They've tasted battle and freedom both. That changes men. The wine's been spilt in the dirt. It won't go back in the flask. This is like inspired by people who say that the toothpaste has come out of the tube. It won't go, it's like the wine's been spilt. Dragons are no. They know that they are the ones who are strong. Meanwhile, the nobles, he stopped to laugh. They are fat and weak and useless. So he's been inspired by Sam. He's not going to be controlled by the fat and the weak and the useless. Today and for all the days, the Myronese are dyed-in-the-wool fighters. Dyed-in-the-wool means... like, it's an old... In the Middle Ages, they used to say dyed-in-the-wool, but it means like... it can't be undone. It's the same. It's the same as actually the spilt in the dirt. But you can't, once the dye is in the wool, it's not coming out. Dyed in the wool. And they'll never be chained again. The jesters whispered to another. They'll take it as truth, all of it. Those are the rules. Wigglegrin looked to Mammoth. That little one, he'll tell his master. He'll tell the priests. So all of this is going to get back to the Red Temple. He could feel the boy's discomfort. Please, no one else hurt. Because too many people have died, and this rebellion is going to cause people to die. There's more, Wigglegrin boomed, his voice echoing off the walls of the cellar. It sounded as though he spoke from the bottom of a great well. And here it is. He remembers his father. He's going to fight. Like, not only is he angry about his father's death, but he's not his father. He's going to fight. From Marine's Temple of the Graces comes a prophecy. The jesters were silenced. So was the voice inside him. When the flame of truth is snuffed out, the dragons and her queen shall return. So he's already heard. The thing he heard is that they are going to kill Bonero. So he knows that Bonero is going to die. And so by putting forward this prophecy, when the flame of truth is snuffed out, Bonero is then going to die after this prophecy goes out. And so people are going to think that this prophecy is going to come true. And so everyone's going to be convinced that the dragon and her queens that the queen and her dragons shall return. Okay. And also the dragons but the thing is the dragons are actually missing. They're not even dead. So like he's banking on the fact that people are going to hear about these dragons returning, or the queen returning, and they're going to think that Daenerys is on her way, and they're going to rebel. And this is what we're getting his plan. And to keep in mind, like, who, the dragons are gone, right? We heard this at the beginning, so we know that, like, Quentin, Victarion, they've got dragons. Anybody's got to be passing by Volantis. It's going to cause a big old revolution when they hear about these dragons still being alive, coming back from the dead, because of Wigglegrin. And so that's that. That is the Fool. A lot of time put in this one. Took a long time. I think it came out pretty well. I think my only thing is that maybe it's just too confusing. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.